a new era in human consciousness, birthing rapid fire technological advancements and the opportunity to create heart-centered networks and relationships that span not only our neighborhood and make better, more meaningful, helpful, whole connections between us and those around us, but globally and expanding even out beyond the borders of our known world and universe for some people. That is some of the highest potential with Uranus now in Gemini as of Saturday, April 25th, 8:50 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. And this is a teaser video about that transit for the larger Uranus and Gemini video I'm going to be recording and publishing a little bit later this coming week, like maybe early to midweek. And I want to share a little bit of a story with you that highlights some of what we might expect in the way that this energy of Uranus might be moving through us, with us in our lives and in the world up until 2033. So an experience that I had the other day, right? I'm preparing my Uranus in Gemini long form video. It ended up being 45 minutes long. Got this draft out. Now, just a little bit of an overview, right? Uranus in Taurus, it certainly brought a lot of change, but Taurus is a fixed sign. It's a fixed earth sign. It's all about rooting something in. It's about creating something that's going to last the long haul. Taurus does not move fast. Uranus is a very fast-moving planet in terms of the way its energy affects human consciousness and the things happening in our world. So we end up having lightning bolt realizations or abrupt change, or, it's always about seeking some new, like it brings the new revelation or technology, something that makes life easier, that brings some kind of level up in consciousness. And so that certainly happened in Taurus, right? We had the era of Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, anything Venusian, right? Money. We had the gig economy. People were finding new ways of making money that were a major departure from traditional jobs. We had the work from home movement during and post-COVID and other things that I'll talk about in the long video. But Uranus and Gemini, before I get into my sharing about my story, Uranus and Gemini is going to be a whole lot faster for a multitude of reasons, right? Uranus is the modern ruling planet of the sign of Aquarius, an air sign that's brilliant at seeing the big picture and detaching from personal attachments to just really see what's going on, some of the mechanics of what's going on, seeing things from a higher perspective that can bring the revelation and the shift and change. And in the sign of Gemini, the twins learning together, learning from each other, communication, curiosity, a non-judgment, just curious, wanting to gobble up all this information and like linkages and networks and think of like directories and roadways and technology, all these things. So I'll be delving so much more in that in the longer video, but I want to share a story of kind of a bizarre synchronicity that happened to me that led to even, I think, more accurate, more meaningful, heartfelt interpretation, plus a channeled message from the Goddess Sedna, or if you prefer, the consciousness of the Goddess Asteroid SEDNA, that never would have come to be had I not allowed some of these really bizarre things to happen and then just followed one thread, didn't get angry, just said, okay, fine, followed it, and then these big epiphanies came. So here's my story. When I was doing this long video, I was writing down the weather forecasting and reporting and all this, and I got it done, and I was just starting to upload it, and I had the recording playing over here. I like to listen to what I do and watch before I post it. Well, I made some of the most bizarre brain and verbal errors in what I was saying. It was like the sign of Uranus or something totally weird like that. Okay, Uranian energy is weird and it's quirky and it's unexpected stuff and it'll be skitsy and unpredictable. And I listened to this and I said that like 2 or 3 times in 10 minutes. Now, I know it's the sign of Gemini, the planet Uranus, right? But sometimes what the brain thinks we say and what comes out the mouth is way different. And I was not going to put that on the internet. So I just said, okay, like that's really weird. I don't know what was going on there, but okay, like let's start over tomorrow. Still ahead of the curve, right? Because Uranus moved into Gemini last night, and I thought, oh, I still have all of Saturday to do this. So I wake up on Saturday morning knowing like, okay, I'm going to talk about this, this Venus-Uranus conjunction, because Venus was at 2 degrees of Gemini at the time of Uranus's ingress into Gemini. So I knew, oh, right, like anytime we have a planet moving into a sign, all the rest of what's going on at that moment, especially something like a conjunction, 2 planets meeting, the energy in archetypes fusing, really sets the tone for the rest of that transit, no matter how long it is. So I knew I was going to be including things like relationship and desire nature, and maybe even like art and fashion and things like that. But what I did not know, because it was not currently in my consciousness at the time, was that there was another incredibly powerful and profound heavenly body that was at the exact midpoint of Uranus and Gemini, at Uranus and Venus, at 1 degree of Gemini. So what was it and how did it happen? I wake up in the morning and I'm scrolling Facebook, and I come across a post originally shared by an astrologer named Ann Whitaker, who had shared a post by another astrologer named Ronnie Grishman. And in my half-awake state, I just really felt like, yeah, I need to read this, one eye open, And I was reading, and she mentioned something, asteroid SEDNA, conjunct Uranus at the time of ingress. I'm not even awake. And then it starts to dawn on me, like, what? Like, Sedna? Huh, like I've heard of Sedna. Haven't been working with Sedna in my practice with my clients. Now, here's the thing about that. There's this idea that collectively we discovered a planetary body when it's time for humanity to become conscious of that and start integrating it into our awareness, into our healing. And you can say the same for your personal astrological practice in what you yourself are aware of or what you're sharing out with your clients, right? And I've discovered this over and over again. So true. It comes into the awareness when it's time, and to trust the timing of that. Especially as an intuitive medium, channel, healer, I just learned you don't question that. You don't say, why didn't we see that before? You just say, oh, right, now's the right time, okay? So I remembered the stories of this Inuit goddess named Sedna, who it's full of like tragedy and suffering and illusion, and then ultimately transformation and birthing beautiful new things. Who there's many versions of the story. One version of the story is that she grew up motherless, and it was she and her father kept trying to pair her up with all these suitors, and she just kept saying no. She wasn't interested in any of them until a birdman asked her to marry him, and he wooed her with all this charms and illusion, and she said yes. And after she said yes and married him, she quickly discovered, oh, this is not the person I thought he was, and none of these things he promised me will be mine, and this is a really miserable existence. And so her father, also realizing that she needed to be saved from this birdman, tries to come and save her. Then the birdman is thrashing in the water in the kayak that they're trying to escape in. And out of desperation to save himself, her father cuts off all of her fingers, and she releases from the kayak, and she's floating down to the bottom of the ocean. All this grief, all this despair. So betrayal, right? By this one we love, betrayal, abandonment. But as she's floating down, each of her fingers is turning into a sea creature. It's blossoming into a different kind of sea creature. And then she settles at the ocean, the bottom of the ocean, and becomes this mother goddess. And then there's more to the story of she does not have fingers, and she can't comb her beautiful long hair. And then animals and the spirits of these animals who were treated wrongly, they're tangling in her hair, and she becomes very angry and very upset. And so then the story goes that the shamans on the seashore learn that they have to do ritual and ceremony to atone for the wrongs and comb these beings out of her hair. Again, this is one version or even many combined, because all stories are like that. So this is ultimately a story of survival and transformation and transcendence of grief and what we can birth out of these things. So I decided, instead of just synergizing for interpretation what this triple conjunction means from a brain place, I decided to go into the channeling state and to talk to the goddess Sedna. And what came through, it's a feeling I've never felt in a conscious channeling before, where my personality steps aside and I allow the higher vibing beings to come in through the crown and higher self. So the way that I do it, it's very safe, and there's really no chance of anything low vibing or manipulative getting in with the protection and such that I have, in case you're wondering. But what came through in the feeling of this all-encompassing mother love, you could feel her past with all the grief. You could feel her power. You could feel this love and the truth and all the things she was saying about how, she said she was speaking on behalf of the consciousness of Uranus and the goddess Freya. Think about it, Venus, Freya. Sedna's at the exact midpoint of those two planets at 1 degree of Gemini at the moment of ingress. Just incredible. She was talking about, we need to spend more time with trees in the coming years and understand the oneness in all life. One thing she said that blew me away, that I tend to do some of this in my personal nature connection, but not quite like this. She said, can you look at the apple tree and see yourself in it? And how we should study trees and then understand that the roots of trees and how they connect, and that all trees worldwide are connected energetically, that it's like the pathways in the brain, and this is a time of developing new heart-centered networks the world over and well beyond. The walls are falling out, that we'll see healing and more expansion in our understanding of neurodivergence and just so many other things, building community like we've never done it before. There's the shadow side too. There's the AI, perhaps unchecked in the coming years, but she assured us through the channeling that the good will always win,